Welcome into the Commander's Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here for this late night edition of the show. Just watched the second episode of HBO's Hard Knocks in season NFC East, and this episode broke my heart. It really did, guys. It featured tight end Zack Ertz very, very heavily, and he was the person that was featured throughout the entire, pre-game portion of the episode. And of course, this is the week where he suffers that torn ACL, which is likely to end his entire NFL career. And we've seen some really interesting, injury type of storylines when it comes to Hard Knocks, specifically in-season Hard Knocks. I remember Jalen Phillips with the Miami Dolphins a couple years ago had that torn ACL, and that was, that was pretty bad. But this one really broke my heart because obviously we cover this team every single day here on this channel, and Zach has been such a big part of what this Washington Commanders team has been all about ever since Dan Quinn took over as head coach last year, and he's a big reason why Jayden Daniels has been as good as he's been to start his NFL journey, and he's been a big reason why this offense has been able to do the things that they've been able to do this year and stay afloat despite all the injuries at wide receiver. He's really been the guy that's been consistent in that room, getting it done every single week. And, it was pretty obvious this was going to be Zach's last year regardless. And with the season, already over, and it's been over for multiple weeks, it certainly it's time to put your eye towards the future and all these different things. And with Zach out for the rest of this season, it's going to give Ben Sinnott a chance to really show what he can do as a former high draft pick for this football team to see if he can take over his spot. But I think this episode did a really good job of illustrating exactly how irreplaceable a guy like Zack Ertz is. And not just because of the football player that he is and, his attention to detail and his technique and his footwork and his route running attention to detail was a big part of this episode where they're going over his process, they're going over how he does the little things right, how he really sets the example for everybody in the building. Where I think Dan Quinn was the one that was describing it, where it's like, even when things aren't going well, you got the old guy, you got the veteran, the guy that maybe doesn't need to do the little things every single time, doing the little things every single time and setting that tone for the entire organization. And, this is why Dan Quinn and Adam Peters in their early years here in Washington have brought in these older veterans, these guys like Bobby Wagner and Zack Ertz and all these guys that have been around the block. They're Super Bowl champions. They know what it takes. And, I think we're all in agreement here when it comes to the future. We got to get younger here in Washington. We got to get, some of these aging veterans, phase them out. Now that the culture has been set, you move forward with some younger players and you start injecting this roster in future off seasons with younger talent so you can compete better in future years. But, you just never want to see something on what I watched on TV tonight, man, where you watch somebody that works as hard and is as good of a person as Zack Ertz is, and to see him, break down on the cart the way that he did, and he's of course fully mic'd. You can hear him crying on the cart with his towel over his head. It was emotional watching that for sure. Just knowing what he's meant to this team these last 2 years, and what really got me was the reaction from the rest of his teammates when he goes down. Like immediately, like a bunch of players, offense and defense, go down to a knee. And when he's being carted off, like everybody's going over to him and all this different stuff. It reminded me a little bit of when Jayden Daniels went down with that dislocated elbow, and literally the entire team is around him because, obviously Jayden is the future of this organization. He's the heart and soul of this organization. He will continue to be that for this team. But, Zack Ertz has been a big part of, what this team built last year and has continued to build this year. And you can tell how much he means to his teammates. And to see him break down in the way that Hard Knocks was able to capture, um, it was emotional. It was, one of the reasons why, it's great, but also not so great to have this kind of in-depth access, because, obviously that's one of the worst moments of Zach's life. And to get an inside look at that is something that's kind of remarkable, but at the same time, you're kind of thinking to yourself, is this something I should even be watching? Because of just the implications of what it means for Zach, and for the rest of the team. But you better believe it, man. Zach's going to continue to be, in the building. He's going to continue to be a supporter of the guys that are going to be out there on the field this last month. And, once again, Dan Quinn, I thought, delivered the perfect message post-game. And he was talking, and I thought the message was perfect because it blended accountability with, a sense of hope at the same time, where he was saying, this same group that took the steps forward in the Bronco game and got us so close at home on Sunday Night Football in front of a national audience to almost get a big win against, a team that currently has double-digit wins with 4 games left to go. I mean, a really good Denver Bronco football team. And then the next week to completely crumble in the way that they did, it's the same people in the locker room, but it wasn't the same guys. It wasn't the same effort. It wasn't the same process. And I like the fact that Dan Quinn held those guys accountable for that. But I also liked how, he had an eye towards the future, saying we got 4 games against divisional opponents the rest of the way. And, if there's any time left to make a statement, now's the time. You've got the New York Giants this week on the road. Then you've got the Eagles twice. You can play spoiler to them, and then you can play spoiler to the Cowboys as well. Obviously, somebody's going to come away with this division. It'll likely be the Eagles. They've got the Raiders, and they've got us twice. So that's a 2-win football team in the Raiders, and then a 3-win football team. That's us twice. So the Eagles will probably win this division for the second straight year, the first repeat champion in the NFC East in many years at this point, which sucks because, F Philly. But, you still got an opportunity. And it sounds like Jayden Daniels is going to continue to play throughout the rest of the season. Maybe they sit him down this week, but it sounds like he will come back at some point. And it sounds like that re-aggravation of that elbow injury is nothing serious, and he'll be back eventually here. And you do still have Terry McLaurin, and he's back now, and you've got Deebo Samuel, and you're going to have an opportunity to see what this running back room can do. Because I actually thought the run game looked pretty good against Minnesota on film this week. I thought the offensive line up front blocked pretty well again this week. It's just you went forward a bunch on 4th down in this game, and you didn't get any of it. You just weren't successful enough on those, and of course that results in 0 points. And it just sucks. It just sucks. That game on Sunday was an embarrassment. There's no sugarcoating that. But certainly your heart goes out to Zack Ertz, who, the tight end coach for the Commanders said in the episode, the best people he's been around in his entire NFL career in terms of work ethic, in terms of attention to detail, in terms of doing things the right way, were Larry Fitzgerald and Zack Ertz. And for the player that Zack Ertz has been throughout his career, he caught a go-ahead touchdown in a Super Bowl for the Eagles, and doing what he did for us last year and in Jayden's development. It's probably going to end his career, and I'm going to miss him. And my heart goes out to him. I hope he makes a full recovery and all that stuff. But to see his career likely end in that way, it just sucks for somebody that's given so much to the game and has given so much to this team. And I just wish it could have ended with something a little bit better than that. But such is life. Life moves on. The season moves on here, and now you can maybe look at the silver lining to that dark cloud, which is Ben Sinnott, the second-year player that's shown a lot of promise in his 2 years here in Washington, gets a chance to get an increased workload, kind of make his case for why he should be the number 1 tight end here in Washington heading into 2026. So hopefully this defense can play better next week. Hopefully this offense can play better next week. You got the Giants trying to get a season sweep against a divisional opponent. That could be something that, it's a consolation prize at the end of the day if you get it, but at least it's something that you can hang your hat on as you head into the off season. And then if you can get a nice little Eagle pelt or a Cowboy pelt on the wall before you head out into the off season and you try to rebuild this thing, all the better. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this team can do down the stretch, seeing if they can play spoiler to some of these playoff contenders in the final 3 games, and hopefully they can get a season sweep against a divisional opponent with a win in the Meadowlands this weekend. So just wanted to get in front of a camera, give my take on the second episode of Hard Knocks. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. If you haven't watched the first 2 episodes, go watch both of them. I think that it's been a really interesting inside look inside the division and to the Washington Commanders. I think the Commanders portions have been really good and worth your while and worth your watch. So couldn't recommend it more. We're going to have another Commanders video come out tomorrow for you guys with whatever news comes out on Wednesday. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, help the Commanders.